Well, thank you for staying with us. It's time now for the news. And the Electoral Commission on Wednesday declared the 2020 presidential and parliamentary general election results. Now, according to the Electoral Commission, the declared results are devoid of votes from Techiman South constituency. This is owing to the fact that the results from the constituency are being contested by both the MPP and the NDC. EC chairperson Jean Mensah, the New Patriotic Party presidential candidate Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo won the 2020 election with 6,730,413, which is equivalent to 51.59% of the total valid votes cast nationwide on December 7.
At the end of a transparent, fair, orderly, and timely and peaceful presidential election, the total number of valid votes cast was 13,434,574, representing 79% of the total registered voters. Permit me to present the results in the order of appearance on the 2020 presidential ballot. At the end of the polls, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo of the New Patriotic Party obtained 6,730,413 votes, being 51.595% of the total valid votes cast. John Dramani Mahama of the National Democratic Congress obtained 6,214,889 votes, being 47.366% of the total valid votes cast. Christian Kwabena Andrews of the Ghana Union Movement obtained 105,565 votes, being 0.805% of the total valid votes cast. Iva Kwabena Greenstreet of the Convention's People's Party obtained 12,215 votes, being 0.093% of the total valid votes cast. Madam Ekuya Donko of the Ghana Freedom Party obtained 5,575 votes, being 0.042% of the total valid votes cast. Henry Herbert Latte of the Great Consolidated Popular Party obtained 3,574, being 0.027% of the total valid votes cast. Hassan Ayariga of the All People's Party obtained 7,140, being 0.054% of the total valid votes cast. Percival Kofi Apalu of the Liberal Party of Ghana obtained 7,690 votes, being 0.059% of the total valid votes cast. David Asibi Apesara of the People's National Convention obtained 10,887, being 0.083% of the total valid votes cast. Bridget Akosua-Jigbonuku of the Progressive People's Party obtained 6,848 votes, being 0.052% of the total valid votes cast. Nana Kunedu Ajeman Rawlings of the National Democratic Party obtained 6,612 votes, being 0.050% of the total valid votes cast. Alfred Kwame Asiedu Walker, independent candidate, obtained 9,703 votes, being 0.074% of the total valid votes cast. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, currently the election results we have declared exclude that of the Techiman South constituency, which has a total voter population of 128,018. 2018. The said election results are not ready because they are being contested. As such, collation has not been completed. It is important to note, however, that the difference between the total number of votes between the first and second candidates is 515,524 votes. As a result, if we were to add the 128,018 full results to the results of the second candidate, it would not change the outcome of the election. Hence, our declaration of the 2020 presidential results without that of Techiman South.
The results of the presidential election in 2020 declared there by the EC's chair, Jean Mensa. Now, President-elect of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, says his topmost priority following his 2020 presidential election victory is to get the country back in shape. According to him, the COVID-19 pandemic has dealt the country's economy and lives of its citizens a heavy blow, which must be effectively remedied. He delivered his victory speech at his Nima residence in Accra.
Fellow Ghanaians, a few minutes ago, what was known by me, and indeed by many, many Ghanaians, was announced by the returning officer of the presidential election, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Mensa. Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, together with Alhaji Muhammadu Bawumia, have been given 4 more years by the Ghanaian people to do more for them. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. In our system, it is the Electoral Commission that has the constitutional responsibility of declaring the will of the people in an election. Prior to this declaration by the EC chairperson, I received personal congratulatory messages from some of my fellow presidential candidates in the election 7th December. I expressed my appreciation to them and thanked them for helping to ensure that the race was largely a keen, exciting contest of ideas whose ultimate goal was the growth and development of Mother Ghana, as well as the improvement of the living standards of the Ghanaian people. Fellow Ghanaians, I must at the outset give thanks to Almighty God for his continued mercies, and for granting my party, the New Patriotic Party, and I, this all-important win. It has been a hard-fought one, which has resulted in an incontestable result, and we are duly grateful for how far he has brought us. We were confident at the beginning of the campaign that the considerable amount of work we had done since coming into office in 2017 would secure for us 4 more years in office. And the declaration made by the returning officer has set us on that path. For that, I'm extremely grateful to you, fellow Ghanaians, for this victory. I am deeply humbled again by your show of confidence, and I do not take this lightly. There could be that tendency for an incumbent president who has just secured a second term in office to, as it were, take it easy and relax, because there's nothing more to lose or prove. I am of a different character. Just as I've been doing since January 2017, I give you my word that I will continue to work very hard to build the prosperous and progressive Ghana for which we yearn. The decisive margin of victory in this election constitutes for me an endorsement of the policies and programs initiated by my government and put before the electorate. And I'm determined to do all in my power to accomplish the task of this new mandate and thereby justify the confidence reposed in me. I assure you, fellow Ghanaians, that I'll do my best not to let you down. The period for campaigning is over, and the outcome of the election has been decided. The Ghanaian people, through the results, have made it loud and clear that the two parties, the MPP and NDC, must work together, especially in Parliament, for the good of the country. Now is the time for each and every one of us, irrespective of our political affiliations, to unite, join hands, stand shoulder to shoulder, and work hard to place Ghana where she deserves to be.
On the other hand, the National Democratic Congress says it will not accept the results of the 2020 presidential elections as announced by the Electoral Commission. Now, speaking at a press conference, a leading member of the party, Haruna Idrisu, said the NDC had overwhelming evidence that proves that the party's candidate, John Dramani Mahama, won the election.
And parliamentary elections, my colleague members of Parliament present, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, including very senior colleagues, Mr. Kofi Totobikwachi, Bevlolate, and Prof. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, let me thank you for your tactfulness. Indeed, but for your love for our democracy, you will not be here at this hour to hear from the National Democratic Congress and its leadership. As a party, we have done extensive consultations and detailed analysis of the outcome of the elections as announced by Jean Mensah, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. And we have come to only one irresistible conclusion, that it's a flawed, discredited election. And therefore we reject without any reservation. We reject the presidential elections as announced by her. And we also want to serve notice that the blatant efforts even to deny us of a parliamentary majority will be fiercely resisted. We know that the good people of Ghana gave us a mandate, and that mandate included a parliamentary majority, that they are engaged in attempts in connivance with the Electoral Commission to undermine and to reduce through brute force and military excessive behavior. We all know the gentleman John Dramani Mahama has been president of the Republic, he's been vice president of the Republic. We know his credentials as a consummate Democrat, and know and acknowledge even his conduct after the 2016 elections continued to be commended and admired by many in the world and in our country. it is worth noting that we in the NDC take pride that we birthed this republic, the fourth republic, which has endured over 25 years. And we have a moral duty to preserve our democratic ethos and values and to make our democracy stronger for the peace and stability of our country. This evening, Ghana's democracy has come under severe attack and needs some rescue urgently. If not rescued, this attack will fester and grow into future elections, and that will disfigure our track record as a true democratic nation. We've been prided for conducting free, fair, and transparent elections. It is even regrettable to note that this evening, before her declaration, Excellency John Dramani Mahama contested the election as a candidate and therefore a stakeholder and interested party, even when he filed a petition to the Electoral Commission today detailing her concerns in the process of coalition leading to declaration. That was treated with utmost contempt. That we consider unacceptable. That address my grievances, address my concerns as a candidate, it was ignored by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. This evening, the declaration by the Electoral Commission also smacks of bad faith, particularly when we are aware that our representatives in the strong room were sent by the chairperson to send a message, call it her special message to our flag bearer, Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Whilst they were on their way, then she decided to hold a press conference to do the declaration. So, whatever message was to be conveyed did not even get to present Excellency John Dramani Mahama. And then her petition, they were told that leave it at the reception to address those grievances. Let us be clear, overwhelmingly evidence available to us make it impossible for us to accept this spurious and hurried conclusion of the Electoral Commission of Ghana, led by its chairperson, who has only become an appendage of the ruling New Patriotic Party.
Minority Leader in the 7th Parliament of the 4th Republic, Haruna Idrisu there. Now, in a last story, the Upper West Regional Secretariat of the National Democratic Congress says it will challenge the results of the parliamentary elections in Lambusi constituency. The party said the coalition of the results was fraught with several electoral irregularities. Regional Secretary Charles Poswing has been speaking to journalists in WA. Correspondent Rafiq Salam reports.
The Upper West Region's NDC went to the 2020 polls with a mantra codenamed Agenda 1111. The party won 6 out of the 11 parliamentary seats in the 2016 general election. Upper West Regional Secretary of the NDC, lawyer Charles Poswing, disclosed that at the close of polls on Tuesday, the party won 8 out of the 11 parliamentary seats in the region.
At the close of the collation of results, the NDC won 8 parliamentary seats, namely one central, which was won by Dr. Rashid Hassan Pelko, one east by Dr. Godfrey Seydou Jassau, one west by Superintendent retired Chita Lanchene Tuobu, Nadoli Kaleo by Mr. Anthony Winkara Suma, Drapa by Honorable Cletus Seydou Dapla, Laura by Honorable A. Ziaden, and Sisala West by Mr. Muhammad Adam Sopare. that Fiema Buse is served by Honorable Dr. Sebastian Sandari. And the MPP won 3 seats, namely Nandong, Sisala East, and Lambuse.
He said the party has found some electoral irregularities at Lambuse constituency, and in due time, they will soon be heading to the court.
Currently, we want to inform the media that the NDC is challenging the parliamentary results of the Lambuse constituency because the coalition was fraught with several electoral irregularities. So we'll brief you at the appropriate time when it is determined.
Lawyer Charles Poison also touched on the results of the presidential election in the region. He urged supporters not to be dampened by the results, but rather go out and jubilate over the free truck in the presidential election in the region.
So the total for the MPP in the Upper West region is 121,230, representing 32.7% of the total valid votes of 369,647. The NDC had a whooping 238,972, representing 64.65% of the total valid votes cast. These presidential results have been signed by all political parties at the coalition center. And this also confirms that His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama won the Upper West region with a whooping percentage of 64.65% of the total valid votes cast.
Reporting for JoyNews, Rafik Salam. Wow.
Well, that's how we sew up the AM news this morning. It's time now for us to delve into the newspapers. That's up next on the AM show. Do stay. Well, welcome aboard, and it's time for the news review right here on the AM show. Thank you for staying with us. And I'm not doing this alone. I'm doing it together with the man, Joseph Akable. It's been a while since we saw you here.
Yes, I've been around.
You've been around. I'm out and about.
I'm out and about, yeah. And you know, this morning I was trying to find my copy of this book. It's the manual on election adjudication in Ghana. It was put out by the Judicial Service of Ghana just some few weeks before the polls.
Right. And
I understand that there is a high demand for this book. I mean,
can you imagine why?
I was hoping you're going to tell me why. I mean, what happened?
I mean, of course, on the back of the fact that the National Democratic Congress, which has contested in this election, is not accepting the results, and with all the dynamics, I guess, of course, people would want to get to know what exactly the contents are of this, what it says about the electoral process and the legal dimensions to the electoral process, especially if you are considering challenging
which seems
the
like
results
the path of the NDC now. I heard the minority leader say that they have serious disagreement. So per the rules, they have 21 days. Within 21 days, they can bring such a petition. But I mean, we'll see how that goes.
That looks likely now, doesn't it?
Certainly.
Especially as, you know, even in 2016, the concession of then President Mahama, though it took a little bit of time, was pretty swift if you'd consider it. And as of this moment, we don't have a concession.
In 2016, it actually came before the president spoke. The president-elect then spoke. But this time around, you have a very different scenario. I didn't expect him to speak accepting because the tone of his address when he alleged that the military may be used to change some results, among other things, it was very, within a 24-hour period, essentially. Then the EC comes out with the results. And so it was a short space for him to obviously now change his position entirely. So, I mean, around this period, what will be taking place will be that the lawyers will be speaking to the agents who had access to the pink sheets.
Right.
They'll be asking
especially in those contested areas.
So to come to a certain determination that, I mean, is there a genuine case of irregularities such that it renders the election results as declared not what should have been declared? So those are...
Because we've had complications with the numbers, and they say in some places the numbers they were getting were not the actual numbers, and that in some cases there were even swaps of numbers and all of that. So quite an interesting picture, but not only on the presidential front, but on the parliamentary as well. And that is what I find, as a student of political science, I find very interesting. I think we'd have to go back to the Liman era to see anything similar, where, if you recall, even Liman's budget was thrown out because he did not have that majority in Parliament.
The problem with the Liman era was that, so it wasn't a super majority. Well, he had about 60-something seats. So he needed the other sides, the other political parties to come on board.
Whatever main decisions had to be taken,
you needed them on board. And so that was the problem that the Liman government found itself in. And I mean, for some of us, me in particular, I don't want such a situation. I mean, it just, we've seen what the current situation...
The fact is, it ties a government down.
Yeah.
An executive that has, and you could tell from the conciliatory tone of the president yesterday. If you listen to him properly, it wasn't the aggressive posturing of we've won, we've beaten you and all of that. You know, that an empowerment, working together, it just paints a certain picture. Because look, even if the NPP were to get a majority, it would be a very slim majority. And do you know what that means? It doesn't even give members of parliament room to absent themselves, to even travel or anything. You want to take a major decision, you need everybody, everybody in parliament.
The next parliament, when you are going out of Accra, you need to get Eziat from to get out of Accra.
It's going to be tricky. Anyway, let's delve into the papers now. And I have the Daily Graphic, the Daily Statesman, the Ghanaian Publisher, the Business and Financial Times as well. I see the Business Finder there somewhere. Which papers do you have?
Daily Dispatch, Daily Guide, the Ghanaian Times.
Okay, so you can do the Business Finder.
Yeah, I'll add that one.
Right. So let's start with you. What do the headlines read out in the Daily Dispatch?
Yeah, the Daily Dispatch front page says EC declares election 2020. It says, see back page, Akufo-Addo, 6.7 million, 51.59% winner, and John Mahama, 6.2 million, 47.36. The Daily Dispatch now produces its front page of November 25, 2020, where it predicted that Akufo-Addo will win by 52.6 and Mahama 45.7. So, I mean, Uncle Ben making the point that he was close to the mark.
He was within range.
Yeah, he was within range. NPA boss enters parliament with big win in Gushegu. And election 2020, how the 16 regions voted. Details on the back page and page 2 and 12 of the Daily Dispatch. Quickly to the Daily Guide, and you come in with the Daily Graphic. The Daily Guide says, Akufo-Addo invites opponents and hang parliament beckons. And Nana wins 51.59%. General Ansah declares on the front page of the Daily Guide. The back page has, I never saw Messi as a rival. It's coming from Cristiano Ronaldo. And
is that after the 3-0 thrashing? What show maybe? What's that to say? I mean, what kind of... Is he trying to be modest?
Consoling Messi there. And Griezmann slams Barca Porsche also on the back page. He's not playing well himself. He should keep quiet. Oba fined $10,000 for airport rant. Details of that story on the back page of the Daily Guide.
But let's just focus briefly on that. Later, we'll delve into that. I mean, some of us, Zero fans, felt that, in the first leg, it was because there was no Cristiano Ronaldo and there was that loss. I think it was 2-0 or 2-1. Yeah. It was 2-0.
Even in that,
now he comes
Barca
in.
Didn't play well. I mean, that victory that Barca got, they didn't play well, actually. So
and they didn't play well in this encounter either. I mean, Barcelona is a far cry from what the team has been. The Blaugrana has been in maybe the early 2000s leading into this period. Now, it's just, Adane Gobe. It does. Apologies to the Barcelona fans, but something else I wanted to delve into. So the projections by the Daily Dispatch.
Yeah.
Which of the polls really got it the closest? I mean, because this is, I mean, the NDC, for example, got 47.6%, the president getting over 51%. So it would be also good to know which of the polls that were
generated. I looked at the UG one.
Got its closest.
The UG one yesterday. The polls generally were quite close in terms of the president's mark. It's the NDC candidate's mark.
Right.
That's
most of them gave him
lesser,
the party much less.
Yeah, than what he got. But he made 47, so the EG put him around 45. And so in terms of the presidents, most of them were closer to the mark. And another aspect that they were all right on was the third force. I mean, they had all indicated that the Ghana Union movement was going to place third. And that came as
actually, the third force was the rejected ballots. So let's call him the fourth force. But of the official parties on the list, the Ghana Union Movement.
Yeah, I mean, some of us were surprised when the polls had indicated that he was going to come third because we were not sure of his reach. But in some constituencies and some polling stations, he was getting 600. I mean, and people are asking, what has happened to the Convention People's Party? What has happened to the People's National Convention? What has happened to the PPP?
I mean, Ivor Kobena Greensmith, who has been here time and again, David Apasera, who is, I mean, representing a party that has a history.
Was shocked. I mean, he said they were going to give electric.
You know what this tells me? It tells me that if parties are able to organize themselves properly, even if it's not a coming together of uncompromised, oriented parties, and they have a message, they just can claw away enough votes from the two major political parties, the MPP and the NDC, and create a situation like what we may have in Israel, for example, in the Knesset and all of that, to ensure that no one begins to think, oh, I am Oga and I can steamroll. Because look, now, like even we're seeing now in Parliament, imagine if some of these parties, like we saw back then when Fatia, Samian Nkrumah got Jomoro. Imagine if we had 1, 2, 3 of these parties getting, slots in Parliament. Do you know what that would have meant?
I think ideally they need to, going forward, focus on getting parliamentary seats, and I agree with you perfectly, especially now that we know that the two parties, obviously, the dynamics of the seats are now changing. And so Karaga, which has been won by Dr. Amin Adam, the question will be asked that, how does the seat look like going forward? Obviously, Hohoi will now look different now.
Very different.
And so it's how will Wenchi now will obviously look different. And so this is the point that they must also focus on and come in and try to get some seats and start making their voices heard again. I mean, in the past we had PNC, we had them in Parliament, we had CPP, now we had MPP and NDC, and now we have MPP, NDC, and one independent who we are told leans NPP again. And so we need them in Parliament to make their voices heard and influence decisions as well.
Well, very quickly with my headlines from the Daily Graphic now. It's Nana Akufo-Addo again declared president-elect. Unite, work hard for country. President charges Ghanaians in victory speech. Polls hugely successful. That is according to Jean Mensah. When you go to page 9 of the paper on the international front, Supreme Court rejects bid to overturn Pennsylvania result, and more, as we're talking of our own home affairs, the likelihood of a challenge in our elections. Well, Trump is still at it, and he's been thrown out practically everywhere he's been.
At every turn. He's been all over. His lawyers have been running around, and they get thrown out. I mean, the people have spoken, and the courts disagree.
But let's face it. Was there really ever an issue in the United States polls? I mean, from day one, as a student of law, I looked into the matter and felt, well, I'm not a law professor or anything, but I knew it was going to be dicey. And with California and other states coming out to give him, Joe Biden the Electoral College votes, it's going to be a real uphill task to make anything out of that. But COVID-19 vaccine allergy warning over new jab. That's something to look at on page 9. And finally, on the back page, third batch of Iswajaman PWDs receives packages, which is correct because, of course, you're talking of batch. Anyway, let's move on to... Are you done with your stuff?
No, just the
headlines?
Ghanaian Times and that of the Business Finder, then I'll be done. The Ghanaian Times, yes, says Nana Akufo-Addo, president-elect, wins second term by 51.59% of votes cast, and 5 shot dead, 15 others injured in electoral violence. And Gami mediation ends a Benin Methodist Church conflict, also on the front page of the Ghanaian Times. The back page has a story about 10 safe spaces identified in Accra for COVID-19 victim support, and EU election observation mission declares elections peaceful, transparent. Has a photograph of Javier Nat, who addressed the press conference. They, however, raised some issues regarding vote buying and abuse of incumbency, and they intend to issue a detailed recommendations to the Ghanaian nation on how to deal with those matters going forward. The Business Finder will be the last one. It says Nana wins with 51.295%. Mahama secures 47.366%. NPP NDC must work together. And FDI is critical to driving financial inclusion agenda, also on the front page of the Business Finder. Ben.
Let's take some stories from the Daily Statesman. So I'll wrap up with my stack. Akufo-Addo beats Mahama again. I won't let you down, President-elect assures Ghanaians. But Some interesting ones here. When you turn to page 3, Deputy Attorney General, and let's not forget that Dindiok Pemka lost his seat. Timpani. You know, Garu and Timpani have now been separated. First, they were just like Bunkpurungu and Yoyo. He's lost the seat, but another, Deputy Attorney General says, we'll accept Fomena MP back.
I think
do they really have a choice with this one?
I think it actually means that we would want him back, not we will accept him back. We will need.
That's a point.
We will need him back.
That's a point. Because can you at this point say you don't want him back?
They need him back.
They need him. Yeah. And this one as well that I wanted to take a look at. GJA condemns attacks on journalists. I'm sure that's something you've followed. There's Akufo-Addo wins second term. That's the front page of the Ghanaian publisher. And same for the Business and Financial Times. Election 2020, Nana wins. Ghanaians want us to work together. But something else you might want to take stock of on the financial front. Inflation falls back to single digit in November, hits 9.8%. Let's capture a few of those stories in the papers and also check out online portals at the end of it. Should time permit us, we might do My Joy Online and maybe some international portals. Let's start with you, Joe.
And so there was this story that I saw about 5 shot dead, 15 others injured in electoral violence. It's a story on page 3. And so the police issued a statement where they detailed some of the things that had gone wrong with the election. It was largely peaceful. We can't run away from that fact. But it's also unfortunate that over the 48-hour period of going to the polls, we've lost 5 lives and 15 others injured. And we are told that the incidents which were recorded between December 7 and 9 occurred in Central, Greater Accra, Bunu East, and Northern regions. And this according to the Ghana Police Service. And so quite unfortunate, and it's something that has...
Did you see the video, watch the video
the Techiman one, I saw
the Techiman South incident? I mean, there were different videos. There were those that I saw on television, on media platforms. There were some that were sent to me personally that I didn't see out there, but I just looked at the scenes and some of them horrifying. You'd hear people screaming and the person is speaking Chi. The person is lying on the floor. The person is not moving. Are they dead? And all of that, all that. And it was so surreal for me because that could have been anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah, and it's quite unfortunate. And the point that needs to be emphasized is the fact that it's a process. We need to get to that. We should get to the stage where we all come to agree that when we are going to vote, you and I, we are going to vote. It's just about who we want to vote for.
Yeah.
And about who most of us votes for. We shouldn't want to use our might, force, whatever weapons to try and decide who.
We are jaw-jawing with our thumbs, not war-warring. But exactly. It appears. But something else, another reality is that our polls are becoming very polarizing. And this country has become very polarized along very sharp divides, ethnic divides, political divides. Thankfully, the religious end is not so bad. And I'm also always grateful, and I say this, the coexistence, especially between the two major religious groups, Christians and Muslims, beautiful in Ghana. But these are not things we should take for granted because gradually the politics is creeping in and it's painting a very ugly picture. There are people who have told me that even with everything that's going on, if one side wins, though they belong to that side, in their own homes, they can't even show it or celebrate. And if the other party, loses, they can't, those sort of dynamics. And I've also seen another thing of great concern, how we're involving children in politics. I've seen it from different sides of the divide, and you'd see children, very in the thick of things. I saw videos of children in the thick of things, both for the MPP and the NDC, and even in the celebrations and all of that. And you ask yourself, when we do these things, what seeds are we sowing ahead of us for our progeny in the future?
Very, very worrying, and we need to deal with some of those issues. Then again, the point needs to be made that, what matters in elections is getting the thumbs. If you don't get a thumbs or you feel that you didn't deserve it, we need to encourage the political parties to focus on not encouraging their supporters to pour onto the streets. If I am a political party, in between the declaration, what I'll be getting myself busy doing is to get the lawyers quickly to contact our agents and get the evidence. Right. The evidence is the name of the game. I mean, that should be where the energy should be channeled to, not onto the streets, because nothing really will change on the streets, and especially when a declaration goes against you. It's only in the court that you can resolve some of these issues. And so, I mean, we hope that it is handled that way. And if you are watching us, I mean, obviously just be calm. You may not be happy about the results, but just know that, I mean, there's a process that can set this aside if indeed there's a genuine basis for it to be set aside. And also those who are jubilating, sometimes the way they celebrate, I mean, they are provoking people to simply engage in violence. And that is also not the very best at all. And so we hope that that is also looked at by all Ghanaians.
Let's not forget that the last electoral petition hobbled the administration then for about some 8 months.
We are not going to have
and this time, of course, some provisions have been made. Some have questioned the legality of those provisions, as in for this particular electoral phase. But we'll leave that to the courts. I mean, we are not lawyers yet.
They will decide. The courts will decide.
They should do their thing. So when I go into the daily graphic, unite, work hard for country. That's on page 13. The president has charged Ghanaians, to unite and work hard for victory, or for the country, I should say. And in a victory speech delivered in a jubilant atmosphere moments after he had been declared winner of the 2020 presidential poll, the president-elect said it was time, and I quote, for each and every one of us, irrespective of our political affiliations, to unite, join hands, stand shoulder to shoulder, and work hard to place Ghana where it deserves to be. More on that, Jean Mensah has been saying on page 16 that the polls were successful. Okoboy, Anyas congratulate winners. Now, 2 top guns that fell. Lejo Kuku is a savage. I mean, if Lejo Kuku were a social media app, I guess they would be Twitter.
I was at Lejo Kuku for Battleground, and I interviewed Okoboy back then, and the question I kept asking him was that, I mean, I've looked at the data from the electoral history. It seems impossible for you to retain it. And he said he was confident. I mean, he's a fine young man. He's a fine legislator, a fine deputy minister. I mean, many look forward to him returning to Parliament, but the people decide. And that's what I love about democracy. I mean, it's about representation and deciding who, we can't explain it. There's no valid way unless there's some exit polls that is carried out. People should go out there and ask the people that, why did you vote him out? I mean, until we do that, the point is that this is what the people have decided.
No, it's the pattern. It's been the pattern there. But the other side to this picture, I feel, is that you cannot take the people for granted. And if you want to win again, it means you would have to do something extra. For
Lejo Kuku, it's difficult to tell whether it's extra, because when you speak to people there are people who say that in the past they've even had MPs who have done so well, but they still voted out. It's like Adentan. I mean, they will just not give you a second term. Either you lose in the main election, or you lose in your party primaries. It is that competitive. And so, like you said, the extra O, which we don't seem to know how or what form it should take, is what such persons should be taking.
But I've also heard things that I've related on air with regard to these coastal areas, outboard motors, premixed fuel, roads, lighting, and certain things that we're taking for granted. Maybe courting the youth more and forgetting that the fisher folk and the rest also are a constituency. I mean, someone would have to get everything right. And I look forward to it, politically speaking, to see that and see what such a person would have done to be able to retain Lejo Kuku. Because right now, it's looking some way. So Dr. Ibrahim Anyas also losing the Tamale seat. On pages 18 and 19, NDC strategizes to recapture Hohoi seat. That's the only seat they lost in the Volta region, while taking Krache East in the OT region, which they lost when it was still part of the Volta region. And then Krobo Enclave retains NDC seats. But let me wrap up with this one. You might find it interesting. China's Supreme Court hires Uganda's ex-Chief Justice.
Oh.
That's on page 5, something you might, want to delve into. Any other stories you'd like to know?
No, those are the main stories for me this morning from the newspapers.
Right. Then maybe this one on inflation very briefly. Then we shall delve into the online portals. I saw that story. And when it comes to these, you begin to ask yourself, yes, good signs. But Charlie, especially when we've been hit by COVID-19, what is it going to mean for the ordinary Ghanaian? So the graphic business, actually a complement of the daily graphic, says inflation drops to single digits in November. First time since COVID-19 shock. And it says for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic, the year-on-year inflation has fallen below 10% to 9.8% in November 2020, according to the Ghana Statistical Service. The rate represents a 0.3 percentage point decrease in consumer inflation, which measures the average change in the general price levels of goods and services over a period of time and measured by the consumer price index. Okay, so that is it with that story. We have some 3 minutes to go. Let's squeeze in a few stories. Let's do this. I'll do my Joy Online, and maybe you can do some of the international portals if you have the BBC, the CNN, or something of the sort. So let's quickly go to my Joy Online this morning. And it says, Election 2020, NDC rejects presidential results. That is the big one there. It also says, Mahama suffers second defeat to Akufo-Addo. Playback of the president-elect Akufo-Addo addressing the nation. That is there. Then full text, you can get that. Jean Mensa's speech during the declaration of the 2020 presidential election. And on the other end, Election 2020, Ghana's democracy is under attack. That's according to Haruna Idrisu. Then there's Akufo-Addo wins second term, and then Election 2020, my immediate task is to put the nation back on track. That is Akufo-Addo. You can check out some photos of MPP supporters celebrating Akufo-Addo's victory on the streets. And then absence of Techiman South collation results will not influence presidential verdict. That's according to the Electoral Commission. So those are some of the stories there. Let's quickly check out. And I want to do the Twitter trends today because it's interesting. At number 10, hashtag JoySMS is there. And then Jesus is back at number 4. Africa is there at number 3. But there's also number 1, I voted John Mahama trending. So let's check out what the international portals will say.
Yes, I'm specifically looking at the BBC Africa page. It says Africa Live has this story about opposition rejects Ghana election results. That is the leading story there. And so the other story is death of 2,000 rare vouchers linked to rituals, and teaching first time dads how to change nappies, also another story there. And so the main story is the story from Ghana about the opposition rejecting the election results. And so you can find details of that story on the BBC African page.
All right, so JoySMS trending at number 10. You can just check out the trends, find out why. Of course, there's always every reason for something Joy to be trending. But when you go to the number 1 trend, I voted John Mahama. Asanteman for Development says, I voted John Mahama and never regretted it. I'll do it again. This next one, Stephen Wadana Aprepari says, from over 1 million to 500K, increased number of parliamentary seats. Well done, sir. I hope to join the team more strongly in 2014. This one says, I voted John Mahama and I'm so proud of JDM, will forever do it again. So there are many more of those on Twitter. That's actually the number 1 trend for today. Maybe something to wrap up with. You do realize that I think the University of Ghana, was one of the polls, later put out something that now when you look at the results, you see that whatever was lost by the MPP, the 2.5% or so, was actually what was added on practically to the NDC's, the 2.5 then also now being about 2.7 for the NDC. So interesting dynamics, but we shall continue doing this, for this period, as long as we're discussing the election 2020 results. But this is where we saw it up. Joseph, thank you so much for joining me for this review. It's been exciting. I wish we could have done more on the football. Anyway, so that's it. It's a wrap for the news review now. We come your way with sports next. Do stay with us on the AM show.
Hello, good morning and welcome to the AM Sports. It's been a while. The last time that we did meet was on Friday, and between then and now there has been a lot going on with Ghana voting for a president and Nana Akufo-Addo being re-elected again. But let's delve into some sports news where the under-20 side, or that's the Black Satellites of Ghana, were involved in a match against Nigeria yesterday, and Precious Boa's late free kick did give Ghana a 1-0 victory over Nigeria at the ongoing Wafu Zone B Under-20 Championship, which is going on in Benin. Now, the win means that Ghana is going through to the semi-finals of the competition.
his marker, Isam. Nobody to support him for the ball. He sends a beautiful one trying to locate Metu Kudo. Metu picks the ball. I think the coach at this particular point in time should note that when a player picks the ball on the flanks, it appears nobody there to support him and is to play. And that is one key thing that the players must know. Game on. Huda with the ball. Tries to locate Matthew. Referee spots it quickly. Foul in favor of the Black Satellites of Ghana.
Well, President Akufo-Addo there, and we're going to be discoursing on those members of parliament from both sides who have lost their slots in parliament. Don't you forget that some of them lost in their primaries, some of them have gone on voluntary retirement from parliament, and others contested on December 7 and couldn't make it through. Now, you've seen some images of those from the MPP side who have lost, prominent among them, the likes of Yawabena Samoa in Adenta, among many others, Dr. Kobwe in Lejokuku and Dr. Derek Odro, I should say, not Dr. Derek Odro. All of these people, bigwigs within the party, George, and are losing their seats. But from the NDC side as well, let's take a look at what the picture really is. I mean, if you go to the Savannah region, Damongo, Adams Mutawakilu losing his seat. They lost in Mion. They lost in Salagan North. Let's take a sneak peek at what exactly the picture looks like when it comes to the NDC and its losses in Parliament. So we're going to actually do this with Dr. Rashid Draman, who will actually be joining us on the beat of Parliament and what exactly has happened. He's Executive Director for the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. There's also Lois Eduamwa-Addo, Programs Manager with WILDAF, and she'll be talking to us about those 39 women who have made it into Parliament. Quite a feat there. And then Colonel Festus Abwaje, a security analyst. So all of them join us this morning. Ladies, gentlemen, I know you can hear me. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the AM show.
For the opportunity.
Hear from you. So just unmute if possible so we can hear your responses. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Great. So before we get into the conversation proper, maybe we can take a look now at some of those candidates who lost their slots from the NDC end. So starting there in the newly created Savannah region, Damongo, which is the capital, Adams Mutawakilu losing there, a bit of a shocker to many. Then in Lambwisi, there's Edward Derry, who also lost his seat. Yagaba Kubori, that's another one of a surprise, the MPP taking that one. Abdul Rauf Tanko, the losing candidate. When you go to Karaga, Swaliu Al-Hassan is there. He lost. And then Mion, another loss for the NDC, Mohammed Abdul Aziz. In Saboba, there's Charles Bintin, who also lost there in that race. There are many more of them that we'll be bringing you. So just keep your fingers crossed for that. And we'll be doing the assessment from both ends, MPP and NDC. Tolon was also a loss. Tatale Sanguli, Zabzugu, Al-Hassan Umar losing there. In Salagan North, Mumuni Al-Hassan losing. And in Binduri as well, Dr. Robert Kuganab Lem. You remember him, of course, and he has actually lost his seat. Mahama Shaibu losing in Daboya Mankarigu, I should say. So I believe there are a few more who also lost their seats. In Cherepone, Samuel Abdullahi Jana Nyete lost there. In Yunyu, there was Joseph Nabu, then Felicia Ajay lost in Kintampo South. When you go to Pru West, which the NDC was hoping to retain, Mohammed Masawud lost there. In Upper West Akim, Derek Dakon, Ohene Asifo Bekwin lost that seat, and Mumuni Al-Hassan also losing in Salaga North. Well, let's start with Dr. Rashid Draman when it comes to how the chips have fallen in Parliament, the losses basically from the MPP side and the NDC side. Dr. Draman, now looking at the losses in Parliament so far, what would be your assessment of what exactly happened? Did you expect some of the losses that we've seen?
Yes. Good morning once again, and thank you for having me. I think the losses were expected. We, even before we went to cast our vote on December 7th, I think we already lost about 60 MPs. We had about 41 who lost their primaries from the MPP, and then we had about 11 who lost their primaries from the NDC, and then we had a number of retirees. So if you add all that, it gave you a figure of about 60 MPs who were not coming back to the 8th Parliament. And then on December 7, we lost about 50 MPs. I mean, you put 33 from the MPP and 17, according to my count, from the NDC. So that gives you, I think, a total of about 110 thereabouts in terms of the numbers. I mean, those who are not coming back to Parliament. And this is, in percentage terms, I think this gives us about maybe 40–45%. If you look at it from maybe historically, we have averaged around that figure in Ghana. You put that within the African context. I think despite our losses, we still are doing quite creditably when it comes to the attrition rate. I witnessed elections last 2 weeks in Burkina Faso, and about 70% of the members were not coming back. Most recently in Botswana, we had the same, about 75% were not coming back. So for me, looking at all these, I'm coming to the conclusion that our members of Parliament are slowly becoming endangered species, if I could put it that way. Their longevity in Parliament is being threatened by many factors. We can go into those factors if time permits.
Okay. Now, just playing back what you said about, our members of Parliament becoming endangered species and also that attrition rate you just spoke of. Is it good enough for us? There may be the dynamics in other countries like you've mentioned, but especially for the sake of continuity in Parliament. And that is also important because then these are legislators, they go through certain processes. I mean, there are people even in Parliament who have been there for a term already and still haven't really learnt the ropes properly. What does this mean, this turnover of parliamentarians every 4 years in our Parliament?
I think for us, I mean, within our context, we have to look at it particularly within the kind of constitutional arrangement that we have. We have a kind of marriage that has been induced by our constitution, a marriage between the Parliament and the executive. And so if you take that arrangement in particular and look at the attrition rates that we have, it simply tells you that this is not good for the business of Parliament. Because you get members of Parliament coming in, and according to our constitutional arrangement, you are surely going to have a big number of them being appointed to become part of the executive. So right from day one, I think their attention becomes divided. And then you have the opposition, which is supposed to be holding on and ensuring that the government is held to account for its actions. But at the end of the day, as we have seen in the past, everything comes down to a vote, and then the minority would have its say, the majority most in most cases, always has its way. But what we are seeing in this current election and what's going to happen in the 8th Parliament is going to be a completely different kind of arrangement, because as the figures are showing, we have a parliament that is divided right in the middle. And so what that means is, for me, if I look at the data, I look at what happened, I say we have what I call the 500,000 voter effect. So the NDC was able to gain the confidence of 500,000 floating voters, if you like, based on the data from the previous election. The MPP lost 500,000 floating voters based on the data from the last election. So what this tells us is that we are going to have in the 8th Parliament a situation where each party, for its own self-preservation, would have to, one way or the other, give and take and come to the middle and make sure that, look, we don't, for instance, look at NDC and think that perhaps maybe the reason why they suffered, the losses that they suffered and couldn't clinch power might be because people were thinking that they were simply excessively opposing would have been constructive. And then you come to the MPP, somebody would say perhaps the reason why the MPP lost about 500,000 voters, floating voters, was because maybe the members didn't use the majority that they had in the interest of the people. They were excessively partisan and always towing the party line. So maybe these are questions that perhaps could be questions that would have created this 500,000 voter effect that I've just described. And so for that reason, what we are going to see is a situation where I think each of the parties would have to make sure that they come to the middle, they compromise.
Right.
You cannot always get what you want. I think there will be instances where the NDC would have to give, and there will be instances where the MPP would have to give. At the end of the day, that would ensure that I think come 2024,
right,
perhaps NDC would be able to convince the 500,000 floating voters that it couldn't.
Okay.
And maybe the NPP might be able to take back the 500,000 voters that it lost on December 7th.
Okay, I'll be coming back to you, Doc, on a number of matters related to some of what you just said. But let me also bring in Lois Eduamwa-Addo, Programs Manager with WILDAF. And Lois, I would like to start from here. 39 women making it to the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic. Now, what were your expectations ahead of election 2020? And were your expectations met?
Okay, so thank you so much. And I will say that, yes, we were having high expectations because the 7th Parliament had 38 women. And with the, we always expecting more progress when it gets to women's participation in decision making, particularly in Parliament. So our expectation was to have more women. We had 126 women contesting from the various parties. So although we've made progress by one woman, it's still too low, our expectation. And so I would say that we had high expectations.
Right. Now, Lois, I just did the calculation, and that adds up to some 14.18% of women who are going to constitute, the next parliament. Not even 15%. Yes, you've got an extra member of parliament, but how much work really remains to be done? You go to other countries, Ethiopia, for example, and among others, and in some of them, there's a 50-50 balance in parliament. Just how much work do we need to do to increase these numbers?
Yeah, so over the years, we've always advocated for an affirmative action policy and law within the political parties and in Ghana to help balance the equation. Because if we wanted to go natural, like women failing in and then going through the election process as our male colleagues do, which everybody says that is the process, so everybody should be leveled with the same measure. We think that the press will be very slow, like we are having this year. Even in some previous years, we lost women compared to even gaining. We are even fortunate that we made a gain this year. So if we want to go by the standards, we weigh our male colleagues with the females. I think that the pace will not we will not have a very rapid pace in terms of having more women in parliament. Other countries that you are citing as an example, they have made extra effort ensuring that women are represented in parliament, like having certain seats just reserved for women. We have quotas. We also have political parties ensuring that they represent women well in their parties. It didn't just come as we see this. They made frantic efforts. But in Ghana, we've not seen so much commitment and effort in terms of ensuring that women are represented fairly on the decision-making table. So if we want to ensure that, then our suggestions we've always made to our government and political parties, which is the affirmative action policy and law within the political parties and in our country, we need to ensure that that comes to pass.
Now, Lois, with all these propositions you have made, they all sound very good, but in engaging the parties, what inroads have you made so far in this very regard? Because it appears that the numbers are still very low. Any light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see that?
Yeah, I would say that this year, the elections, we saw women taking up unique roles, which previous years we've not seen. We saw one of the main political parties filling a woman as a vice presidential candidate, which was very, critical in our politics, and this will urge other major parties to also replicate such moves. We also saw 3 women also contesting for presidential candidate. All these are little progresses we are making year, election after election, seeing women come to the limelight and taking up key roles. So these are all didn't just happen. It's been our continuous engagement with the political parties, easing the process for women to be able to also feature in the decision making.
Well, the feed for Lois a bit problematic there. I'll get back to her on that very beat because there are other, pertinent questions that we need to delve into in that respect. But moving on, we shall also engage Colonel on, some concerns in there with regard to security matters and some of the happenings on Election Day. Colonel Festus Abuaje. Now, Colonel, on the security front, basically, what would be your initial assessment of what we saw? We saw some scenes we didn't want to, in Ododo-Diodio, Teshiman South, among other places. What would be your initial assessment of the 2020 polls?
Well, once again, thanks for having me. My own assessment is that given that we tout ourselves as being a beacon of democracy on the continent, we should have had a zero-incident-free elections. But we know that that wasn't the case. We came from the voter registration with at least 9 major violent incidents that resulted in the death of at least 2 persons and a few more injured, several items of property, different categories destroyed. The violence didn't stop after the voter registration. It continued into the voter exhibition. And sadly, it reared its head in the elections proper. Let's work with the police press release, where it said that there were a total of about 61 electoral and post-electoral incidents nationwide. That figure could be contested, but it's early days yet. We need to hear from other institutions like Codeo and OneApp, CDD, and so on and so forth. But of this 61, the police says that only 21 were true cases. Now, I don't understand what that true cases mean and whether the others 40 or so were fake. But of these true cases, 21 of them, 6 were fatal, and they resulted in the death of 5 lives and about 20 injuries. So between voter registration, post-voter registration, elections, post-elections, and I don't think the election process itself, the cycle is over, given that probably there are a few more constituencies that are supposed to be declared. We have lost in the region of 7 lives and more than 20 injured. And we need to ask ourselves, is this a democracy or is it not a democracy? That's one side. The other side is that look at the videos and evaluate the manner in which that force was used. I can say for a fact that there is no police or military academy or training center where crowd management or crowd control is managed in the manner that we saw at Techiman South. I want to believe. In fact, I cannot bring myself to accept that those who were engaged were professional police officers and not military officers. I think that in all likelihood, there were men dressed in those uniforms who do not belong to these institutions. Because the manner alone in which that fire was opened, sporadically, indiscriminately, I saw ricochets from the ground, meaning that they were firing right in front of the crowd. You know, several dropped on the ground. Initially, they said 3 were dead. Now we're told by the police that 2 were dead. So all was not peaceful. Granted that it was not widespread and the scale was not too large, it is a blot on the democracy of this country.
Right, Colonel, but let me quickly...
Yes, please.
Let me quickly ask you, valid concerns you're making, and when I saw the videos from Techiman South, also very grave, especially listening to what some of the officials were saying in the background. But is it possible to have an incident-free election anywhere? Not even in the United States do we have that. I mean, so when you say incident-free elections, what exactly do you mean? Were you expecting that there would be nothing of this sort? Is that what you're implying?
What I mean is it acceptable in a democracy as we claim that on the 7th, Senya Breku East, if that is what it is, Kasua, that men should drive by in a tainted, SUV and open fire at a vehicle allegedly or supposedly having on board a candidate, a parliamentary candidate. Why do we need to go to that extent? That is Kasua. Now let's go back to Techiman South and ask ourselves, the way and manner in which we saw the security personnel lined up, and each one of them, I was eagerly waiting to see or hear what we call fire control orders. Managing a crowd requires that there must be a leader who is authorized to issue fire control orders. That fire control order must indicate the target and indicate the number of rounds. And invariably, it is 1 round, and it is to a non-vital area of the body. At least we saw that somebody had been shot close to the chest. So, we cannot say that because there were only 5 deaths. I mean, the 5 deaths were absolutely unnecessary. If the rest of the 32,000 plus or 33,000 plus voting centers could be peaceful, why were these isolated places not peaceful? The point I'm trying to suggest to you is that, in all likelihood, those who were involved in these incidents of fatalities were not professional policemen and professional soldiers. In all likelihood, there were others dressed in the uniform to look like them. And we cannot accept that in a democracy. Because let me tell you, this democracy is a fragile democracy. Indeed, I want to also argue that we don't need to compare ourselves with anybody, not least America, because probably we've done better than America under, relative or comparative circumstances. But I argue that when I left a certain studio on the 7th in the night, the only fatal incident that was recorded was the one at Kaswa, which was a drive-by, although targeted. When you add Savelugu and you add Orododiodo, where at least there were 2 other incidents or separate incidents, and then you add Techiman South, our democracy is not healthy. There is still embedded in it the blatant resort to the use of force to settle political scores or to intimidate and to influence the outcome. But talking about the outcome, we need to also look at the impact of these incidents on the outcome, especially Techiman South, where you could hear clearly that somebody was ordering everybody to get out of the room. And I was asking myself, did that have to include the observers, the party observers? And if indeed it included the party observers and all of them left, could there be the likelihood that some foreign materials, pink sheets or whatever, could be smuggled into the collation center? If that was what it was, or whether it was, I don't think it was a polling station, that was a collation center. You see it? So the manner in which even the setup was organized, EC officials, political party agents, other international, local observers, plus political party observers, all of that leaves a lot to be desired. We need to do
to hold it here for a while, Kano.
Yes.
Right. Let's leave it here for a while. I'll come to some other specifics with you, but let's reconnect with Dr. Draman. Now, with all that we've discoursed on, do you think it's going to be difficult for the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo administration in Parliament in executing, what we would expect a government to execute? Because now there's a lot that would have to go through Parliament, and should the majority be lost or should it be won by a very slim margin, just how difficult do you forecast it would be for this administration in executing the work of government?
Ordinarily, it will be difficult under, ordinary circumstances. But we are dealing with exceptional circumstances here. As I indicated earlier, I think the outcome of December 7 is one that speaks to the fact that, Ghanaians are not happy with a lot of things going on, I think, both within the executive and within Parliament. So, again, I'll go back to my point. Yes, the opposition would have to play its role. Whichever party becomes opposition in Parliament would have to play its role of ensuring that they hold the government to account. But at the same time, this must be done in a constructive manner. It mustn't be just business as usual and just opposing because they have to play that role. And again, the party that would hold the reins of power would have to remember that, just being excessively partisan and towing the party line, I think is not going to help their cause. So at the end of the day, given the extraordinary circumstances we are going to find ourselves in, it calls for a lot of compromise. It calls for a lot of give and take. Otherwise, I think we are going to see perhaps maybe a repeat of what we saw on December 7, and perhaps that might even be more brutal when we come to 2024.
Dr. Draman.
I think the point
Okay, please go on with that point.
No, so the point I'm trying to make is that I think at the end of the day, on 7th January 2021, the NDC and the MPP would have to work together to make sure that they execute an agenda that is in the interest of the people of this country. Otherwise, anything short, I think, would incur the wrath of the citizens. And yes, maybe we might not have recourse, an immediate recourse, but I think the voter is very patient. And 4 years is not a long time enough.
Right.
And we'll have our say when the time comes.
Well, will that marriage of the two political parties in Parliament, maybe a forced marriage all the same, but do you feel it will be possible, especially considering now that the NDC is disputing the outcome of the election? In fact, they are contesting on the presidential level. They are also contesting at the parliamentary level. Looking at the rancor right now, do you feel it will be possible, should the NDC have a majority in Parliament, do you feel that marriage between the MPP and the NDC to ensure that the government business is executed, do you actually feel it is possible? And what will it take? What concessions will have to be made for that to happen?
Well, I think we are proceeding on the assumption that the legal processes will take their course, and then we'll run their course, and then we'll have some settlement in terms of the legal pronouncements of what the actual results of the 2020 elections are. And then on the basis of that, I believe that all the parties are going to come together one way or the other. And as I said again, it's going to take a lot of give and take. I mean, because this is a process that is going to be repeated in 4 years, in 8 years, and so on. And so each party would have to, believe, that this is an ongoing process, and you don't have to destroy your chances today because you are living to fight again another day. So, and because of that, I believe that the two parties are going to find a way to work together. And then also in the 7th Parliament, I think the Right Honourable Speaker took an initiative to ensure that maybe for the first time we would have what is called the private members bill. So instead of all bills and the legislative agenda being set by the executive, we are going to see some of that agenda being set by Parliament. And that is going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the 8th Parliament. And just to conclude, I think if you look at, countries where oversight has worked, countries where, parliamentary business has been effective, there are countries where no one party has an overwhelming majority. Countries where there is always the need for a lot of compromise, there's always a need for a lot of give and take. And I think that is what we are going to see come January 7, 2021.
Now, focusing on some of those highly contentious areas, and I'm talking about places that it was not expected that either the NDC or the MPP would make gains. In the eastern region, some of those seats going to the NDC, some of them still being looked into. But in the Volta region, we have Hohoi, for example, going the way of the MPP, becoming blue for the first time, with John Peter Amewu taking that seat. Looking at the dynamics, would you say it points to the discerning nature, how our voter population or the electorate is getting discerning? And the NDC, for example, has already said that it is starting work to reclaim Hohoi. How easy or difficult would that be?
Well, I think that we all want to get to a point where we have a real democracy. I know that's an ideal that every country aspires to. But we want to get to a point where our elections are not influenced by where perhaps we come from. We want to get to a point where ethnicity and regionalism and so on do not influence our elections, so that people would vote on the basis of the issues that are at stake. People would vote on the basis of maybe what does this mean for my life, and what does this mean for my country, and what does it mean for my children? You know, I mean, sometimes we simply say it very easily that Ashanti region is a stronghold of the MPP. I mean, so if you put anybody there, whether it's a solid candidate or not, he or she is going to get voted. Volta region the same. You talk about NDC and so on and so forth. We want to move from that kind of arrangement where people would vote on the basis of the issues.
Well, technology, stepping in there. I would have wanted to find out from him whether we're actually getting there. But if he remains with us, we'll be able to check that bit out. Let's now get to Lois, whom I believe is still with us. Lois, if you still are with us, now, one other thing I would have wanted us to get into, even as we talk about upping the numbers of women in Parliament, would be this. Do you feel, apart from all that you've suggested, do you feel maybe we need to get the parties to stop fielding pairing two women in same constituencies? Is that a possibility? Is that something you've ever contemplated? Do we have Lois? Okay, so Lois, it appears you might be on mute, so you might have to unmute. If you can hear me, Lois. But the question I was posing was simply this, that we've spoken about other moves to get more women engagement in Parliament. I'm just trying to find out from you, would it be something you've ever contemplated, discoursing with the major political parties, maybe practically all the political parties, when it comes to agreeing to not field two women or multiple women in the same constituency, to up the numbers, to improve the chances of women getting into Parliament? So Lois's feed is frozen, just like we had with Dr. Draman. Is Dr. Draman on now? Okay, so let's go back to Colonel Festus Aboagye. Now, I was about to situate the conversation properly on Ododo Diodio, where, in fact, the Member of Parliament, Nina de van der Pooy, was arrested over supposedly instigating a shooting incident. So Ododo Diodio itself being a hot spot right here in the Greater Accra region. What concerns do you have there in that specific regard with the allegations that were made, which, by the way, have not been proven? What concerns do you have there with the political actors and some of the chaos we saw on election day?
Well, to start with, as far as Ododo Diodio goes, I don't think it came as a surprise. And I want to actually explain that there were two separate incidents. I think there was one very early on, at the start, over the arrangements for the different ABC or 1, 2, 3, polling stations, which somehow was managed, and then the process started until much later on when the one involving firearms, happened. It could have been worse, but I want to believe that given that Ododo Diodio was rightly or correctly identified, mapped out by the police as a hotspot, the IGP might have arranged to assign a reasonable number of election security management personnel to bring the situation under control. I see, normally I believe in the cause and effect equation or discourse. If every one of us had gone to these polling stations and the collation centers and sworn that we're going to commit ourselves to uphold, the principles of democratic elections, there wouldn't be any reason for anybody to resort to other unnecessary measures. So we always need to find out, why do certain people behave the way they behave? If the stakes are high and somebody thinks that the ballot is going to be stolen then of course that person will be agitated to try and take measures. And in trying to take measures to stop that stealing from taking place, you end up with these kinds of situations. To start with, maybe the Election Security Task Force should have been able to bring the situation under control. But as we know, in many instances or in some instances, that is not the case. So I wouldn't want to fault that MP too much, until we know the details of the case, because the police report is only 3 lines on what looks like an A4 or A5 paper. It's not enough to actually look at the context of how that incident started evolving and what exactly the member of parliament said. Be it as it may, the situation was brought under control. I'm told that he was released. The counting went on, the collation proceeded, the results were certified, and I think we all know the outcome of the elections there. But earlier on, I was saying that we can't have a zero incident election. It's absolutely possible. When we look at the serious cases of the violence, that is the question we need to ask. Why did they happen? And I want to suggest that they happened because those persons involved, were not necessarily thugs, but they were thugs who were standing on some powerful ground to think that they could take those measures, like Eutu Senya is that I mentioned, that one report said that they fled, they ran away. Now I have information that no, people were not interested in arresting them and enable them to escape. That is one. We necessarily need, even Savelugu, where an incident took place close to the house or at the house of the candidate of the NDC. And I'm told the boy or the houseboy or somebody was either killed or dead or something like that. Why do we need to do that? When we have created institutions like the police and other security services to ensure that elections are secure, why do we take the law into our own hands? We do so because the evidence shows that those who do that exploit the political base of power that they have, And I'm even wondering whether any of these incidents could lead to successful prosecutions. I doubt, because invariably, if they are political party members, especially belonging to let's say, the incumbent, they're going to be set free, and even if they happen, the police will not come back and tell us what the outcome is. So there is a lot that we need to do to consolidate and strengthen our democracy, the way and manner in which we're going about it. And let me probably end on this. Look, the use of force is not the end in itself. On democratic principles, one, those who open fire must go to court and give reasons why it was necessary for them. They need to justify in a court of law that it was necessary to open fire. They need to justify that shooting somebody in the upper part of the body was also lawful. They need to show that after the fire was used or opened, they took measures to help those who were injured. All of these must be cases or elements of the rule of law. The video that I saw, if I saw it and interpreted it correctly, those who were injured, those who were dead, were held by the public, not by the security personnel. And that is wrong. It is wrong. That is not what we teach. You see it. So in terms of the broad security framework, we still have a lot of work to do. And if indeed we need to consolidate this democracy, then it is incumbent upon us to ensure that our security architecture for elections, as I've emphasized, is the work to be done by the police. And that the police will act professionally in accordance with the principles of democracy, respect for human rights, and the rule of law, for instance.
Colonel Festus Abwaje, now we seem to be creating some sort of culture where people mass up, regardless of the political party they support, at the Electoral Commission's offices. I mean, we saw it in Kumasi, we saw it here in Accra. How much of a concern is that, and what can we do from the end of the political parties to stem the tide of such developments? Only yesterday, we needed, water cannons and all of that to disperse crowds. What do we do?
What should we do? If the premise or the assumption in your question is that it is illegal, then we need to address that. My understanding is that it is everybody's political and civil right, to demonstrate peacefully. Now, if they choose to the ECHQ, that is fine. As long as they are peaceful, they don't undermine law and order. They cannot be stopped. They shouldn't be stopped, So the premise for the question probably is wrong. Now, let's remember that many years ago, there used to be a board at Independence Square. We can set up some of these points with large screens, in urban areas for people to gather and watch the results, unfolding. Now, talk about unfolding. Some concern has been expressed about how the EC delayed, especially the presidential results. That's the announcement of the presidential results. As in when they were certified, for instance, by constituencies, by the regions and so on. The EC could have put them out there. Now, when the EC waited and waited and waited, that caused a bit of apprehension and tension started mounting. Then you have these incidents allegedly to disrupt some of the procedures and then to have foreign material smuggled into collation centers and to have counts and recounts and counter recounts, I think in some cases 3, 4, probably 5, When these things start happening, you inflame passions, So if the EC is proactive and is sharing the results of or the outcomes of the elections as and when they come in, people will get a feel. Indeed, I suggested last night that coming to give one A4 sheet of the totals is not enough. Before that happened, the EC should have called the political parties and given them the spreadsheet, starting from polling stations, aggregated into constituencies, aggregated into regions. For everybody who is reasonable to look at the numbers, add them up, check with the pink sheets that were signed at the polling stations.
Okay.
Right now, there are a lot of discrepancies, that is being paraded around between EC figures and the certified results at the polling stations. You see, it doesn't help democracy. It's all about this question of transparency.
Right.
See, when it's opaque and people cannot see through, then they are, likely now to think that somebody is trying to steal their vote.
Okay.
And that accounts for probably the massing up.
Very quickly.
We saw, as you said, at different places.
Right. Very quickly to wrap up with you, and then I'll conclude with Lois as well. I'm going to give you 2 questions. I'm hoping we can address them very quickly. One, the NDC has refused to actually, accept the results of the elections, both on the presidential and the parliamentary levels. How much of a security concern is that, so to speak? And from the other angle as well, how would you rate the work of our security forces in election 2020? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, how would you rank what, the performance was of our security services? So the NDC and its non-acceptance, is that a security concern? And the security forces, what they did in election 2020, how would you rank them?
I don't think it's a security concern. This is a rule of law issue. So if the NDC says that it rejects the results, and I suppose that it is going to proceed to go to court with evidence that it has, that is fine. We need to be clear that the the minority leader in parliament who made that announcement did not say that they were going to use other measures, including force, to ensure that the situation is reversed. So my inclination would be that they're going to proceed from the statement of the rejection through the courts and have it resolved, which is consistent with CI 127 and indeed with the constitutional provisions. Now, come back to how the security forces performed. If we use the benchmark of the total number of polling stations, about 33,000, let's say, and then you minus the few isolated incidents, you can say that on a proportional or proportionate measure, the security forces did well in maintaining law and order and security of the electoral process. However, as I started, if you go back to the voter registration, where there were 9 major incidents, then you come back to post-voter registration, where it dropped from about 9 to about 6 or 7. Then you come to the elections, where it dropped to, let's use the police statistics, it dropped to 6. It means that our electoral process is still volatile. You see, it is characterized by the use of force resulting in fatalities. And I've said that between voter registration and the elections, we are looking at about 7 deaths and upward of 20 injuries, besides, if you like, the destruction of property. That is not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable. Indeed, we need to be aiming higher. And I'm waiting for Codeo and others to come out because they have more resources to actually do the comparative analysis. But I won't be mistaken that this 2020 election is the deadliest since 1992. That we've not had deaths in elections except this 2020, where we've had 5 of them. And that's not good enough.
Colonel Festus Abwaje, thank you very much for joining us for this discussion. He calls the 2020 elections the deadliest since 1992, owing to the deaths, the 5 deaths we've recorded. Lois, if you can hear me, I would take your final comments on the women participation in Parliament. I was asking a question earlier about whether it would be feasible to discourse with the political parties to not field all women contestants in the same constituency so that the chances of women actually getting to Parliament would be improved. What is your take on that? Hello, Lois. If you can...
that one rather is the best. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I think that fielding all women in the same constituency is one of the best, because at the end of the day, whatever the outcome is, a woman will certainly emerge the winner. And in some countries that have had more women, they have really reserved seats where only women contest. So they know that at the end of the election, out of the 30 reserved seats, we know certainly 30 women are going to automatically be in Parliament. So if we want one of the way out, that is one of the, because when you field women and men, many of the time women are not able to make it to the end. I mean, successfully, looking at all the violence and the violence perpetrated against women and the stress that go with campaigning for to win. So fielding all women makes it more easier, because you know that certainly a woman will emerge the winner.
My final question to you now, of those 39 women we're seeing going into Parliament, a number of them from the ruling NPP, the incumbent. How many of these what percentage would you like to see being given appointments as ministers, deputy ministers, and the rest? Do you have any projections in mind?
What the feminists and the women's rights environment always ask for is a minimum of 30%. And many of their manifestos, they have also projected the MPP in 2016, which they said they are continuing with most of their provisions in is 30%, a minimum of 30% representation. The least we can ask for is a minimum of 30% representation in decision making in this government.
Well, I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Lois Eduamwa Ado, Programs Manager with WILDAF. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the AM show. Of course, we're also joined by Dr. Rashid Rahman, who is actually with the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. And earlier, I was also interacting with Colonel Festus Abwaji, a security advisor. It's been quite a conversation, but of course, we still are in the aftermath of election 2020. And when we return from the break we're about to take, we'll be going into the regions to find out what exactly is happening there as we speak to our correspondents. Do stay with us on the AM show. We shall be right back. Well, welcome back on the AM show. As promised, we're going into the regions now, and we're going to be interacting with some of our correspondents there to gauge the mood in these regions and find out what exactly the reactions have been. Let's connect with Kwejo Nyako, who is actually joining us from Cape Coast in the central region. Kwejo, if you can hear me, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Great. Now you've unmuted. Now, I'd like to find out in the Cape Coast, for example, what has the reaction been on the back of the elections, both presidential and parliamentary? And then we can extend to the rest of the central region.
Well, it's been massive. Yesterday in the evening, for instance, there was brass band music procession throughout the principal street of Cape Coast. You go to Kotokraba, you go to London Bridge, you go to Kingsway, Bacano, and its environs, Abra, and all of that. In fact, what was remarkable was that the MPP supporters that were jubilating, they were actually jubilating with the campaign song of the NDC, and a lot of people really joined. So it was really fascinating to learn how a political party could use the opposing campaign song to celebrate when they won. So it was really an interesting spectacle. It has traveled in the morning as well. Even though other people are going about their normal duties, they've gone to work and all of that, you can still find people in their MPP paraphernalia still celebrating the win. In fact, in Cape Coast, they couldn't really celebrate well because both seats have been lost to the NDC. Kwekuri Kithagen, for instance, retained his seat. And then in the Cape Coast North, Barbara Shaisi lost the seat to Dr. Kwame Nyamintanyakon. So the celebration started earlier with the NDC when they won the parliamentary seat, but it was taken over shortly by the MPP when the presidential results were declared.
Right. And I was about to ask you specifically about those issues you just delved into. The NDC taking over Cape Coast when it comes to the parliamentary, but losing the presidential. How have the people reacted, to that, the losses in Parliament and the likelihood of Parliament being, a very tight race? In your interactions, how have the people reacted to that?
Well, so for instance, in the Cape Coast North, it wasn't that surprising. It was known in town that Barbara Shaisi was going to lose, but about 3 weeks to the election, things changed. And so it was very too close to call because a lot of work had to be done by the MPP MP, the incumbents there. But, it was unfortunate that she couldn't, really maintain that seat. But in the Cape Coast South, it was such a fierce contest that between Kwekuri Kithagen and the mayor of Cape Coast, it was a contest that no one could predict who was going to win. But Kwekuri Kithagen kept on saying that, he was confident of retaining the seat. But we do not really know how that contest was not. So it didn't really live up to the billing because Kwekuri Kithagen eventually won with some difference. The margin was not what we witnessed in the 2016 election. In fact, he won with some good margin. So in the Cape Coast South, that was what it was.
Now, give us a complexion of what it looks like now when it comes to the seats the different parties have actually got. The NDC and the MPP foremost among them. What complexion has the central region taken that you can share with us?
Yes, so prior to the election, it was obvious that some of the seats that were won by the MPP, they were going to go back to their owners. If you look at the Kumfi constituency, that seat has been consistently won by the NDC, but people realized that it was as a result of the wind of change. That was why the MPP was able to annex that seat. If you go to the the Chufu Etimukwa constituency, from 1992, the NPP had not won that seat before, but in 2016 they won. Abraham Jumodum won that seat, but today that seat has been lost. The shocker of all of them was the Upper Denchura East and the Upper Denchura West constituency. Of course, the Upper Denchura West constituency, it is still in contention, and so as we speak now, it's 12 seats for the NDC and 10 seats for the MPP, unless that one is rectified and we are made known that that one has been certified, then the MPP would get either 11 or the NDC will get either 13, and so that seat is still in contention. If you go to the KEA constituency, Samuel Atamos, that is where the NDC running mate, Professor Jinan Opoku-Agyeman hails from. She went to vote them, but the NDC at the end of the day still maintained that seat. Samuel Atamos maintained that seat. For, of course, the Cape Coast North and the Cape Coast South have been spoken about. If you go to the Chufuhiman Lower Denchura constituency, Bright Rekubrube of the NPP retained that seat. In fact, that seat has been won by the NDC before. It was carved out of the Chufu Etimukwa constituency. If you go to the Upper Denchura East constituency, the MPP maintained that seat. Go to the Abra Asebu Kwamankese. It was a contest that was very close. It was a close shave for the incumbent NP, Elvis Morris Donko. It was fiercely contested by Felix Kwachio Fosu, and at the end of the day, the margin was 176. So Felix Kwachio Fosu of the NDC lost out of that seat, and the margin was 176. If you go to the Mfantsiman constituency, it was one key constituency we are all keeping our eyes on, because the MP died 3 months to the elections, or 2 months to the elections, and was subsequently replaced by the wife. So at the end of the day, the wife eventually won that seat. So if you look at the NDC candidate, James Esan, both husband and wife have beaten him. And so if you go to Fansiman constituency now, it is Ophelia Kwanzaa Hayford who won the seat. Right. Another seat, the Ejumaku Enyan Esiam constituency. Of course, you know that we did the battleground there. Kesel Atufosin came up with the NPP candidate, and surprising, a lot of us thought that that constituency was another constituency that was too close to call. But at the end of the day, the margin that Kesel Atufosin gave the contender was about 10,000. If you go to the Ekumfi, of course, we've spoken about it, the NDC candidate one. Go to Efutu, Afenyo Markins retained that seat. If you go to Aguna West, Cynthia Morrison, the gender minister, also retained the seat. Aguna East has been consistently won by Queensta Pokuya-Soya, and she retained the seat. She beat the Minister for Tertiary Education, Professor Kwesi Yanka, to it. In the Ewutu Senya East constituency, that seat was also retained by the NPP. Ewutu Senya West, Jojanda lost to Gezela Tete. And so in the Esikuma or the Brain Brakwa was also lost to the NDC. So the NDC now has that seat. And so the general outlook of the central region is that the NDC today has 12 seats. Now we are yet to know the outcome of the Upper Denchura West constituency, and the NDC had 10. Prior to the election, the MPP had 19 seats. and the NDC had 4 seats. So look at the difference. So now the NDC has really closed that gap and have even now taken the majority of the seats in the central region. So that is how the outlook of the central region now is.
Thank you very much. But a lot of you have actually been calling us. You can actually reach us via that number, 0302 211-691 extension 2, and share your thoughts with us. We have Della from Kojokrom, Takrady. Della, good morning to you.
You and your entire crew.
Great.
It's been a hectic day for you.
Right. Now, what are your thoughts on election 2020 that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, it seems there's certain issues that need to be clarified. Normally, when you vote in our areas, some of us as agents, we don't follow up the ballot boxes to the collation centers because it is protected with seals. But this time around, some of us decided to follow them to the collation centers. Master, I don't know how come government pick up in a Skadikaten, for instance. That's where I was. And I will speak to the fact because I was there and I saw everything vis-a-vis. Imagine 10 p.m. a government pickup coming with the ballot boxes with that seal. And it took some of us and the military men to drive that pickup away. Less than 30 minutes, that pickup came back with a heavy police armed men with pepper spray all over, giving warning shots, paving way for those ballot boxes to be entered into the collation center. Ballot boxes without seals.
Which polling station was this, just for the sake of clarity?
It's Skadikaten collation center. I was there, and some of us, we cried physically. Ballot boxes that were not sealed with political party sealed, opened, fully guarded with police arms, came into the collation centers so that they could be added to the vote of the incumbent MP. And this is so sad to extent that, due to the policies put in place, both political parties knew where they won and where they lost. So how come?
Was there any report made about this incident?
Ballot boxes that were not protected with seals to be added to the votes that were counted at the polling station. I don't know how come GC allowed themselves to be used.
Well, some allegations being made there. I was asking, though, whether, some report had been made on that incident, because if it's that grave, of course, reports ought to be made. But let's connect with Fatau in Tamale. Fatau, good morning to you. Now, what are your thoughts on the back of December 7?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Fatau. If you can hear me, what are your reflections on Election Day?
Yeah, I'm talking to you from Tamale. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Fatau. What are your reactions
good morning to you,
to election
good
2020?
Morning to the entire, shall I say, crew of your station. Yes. To be honest and sincere to you, our democracy is now thrown to the dogs. Since yesterday, since 7 p.m. up to now, I don't understand how our democracy is going now. Why? What have we done wrong to deserve this kind of military? I don't know. It is a strange thing. But in the first place, I want to blame you, the media. In the first place, I used to respect JoyNews a lot. But it seems this government has brought through this year to work on his behalf. I'm telling you, some of us, we are very angry about the situation. You cover your distance. It's not the best. Look at what has happened at Chechima South. No, and none of you, the international observers, you look at all these things, not what is reported, and you people just turn a blind eye to all these things. You claim, and then you back this government. In fact, the figures that you've given, some of us we've lost. It's okay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your time with us, Fatau. But you spoke about Techiman South. We covered that extensively with videos right here on JoyNews, making known exactly what was happening. In fact, we're one of the first outlets to make that known. And in terms of the declaration of results or any actions to be taken, we only cover as a media house. We have no further responsibility in that regard. And we only made projections as well ahead of what figures we had got certified. Let's move on to Amos in Kintampo. Amos, good morning to you. What are your reflections on election 2020?
I think the whole election in general has been very competitive, and I'm very impressed with it because it has proven that Ghanaians are descending and we are beginning to see different sides of the political parties. And so far, though my candidate probably might not win, but it has proven that we have given them a good challenge.
Right.
But looking at things, I think the media also did very well, and though some cases they actually projected some other misleading information, some stations actually churned out incorrect figures, and I think they should apologize for that. But so far, I think it's good, and we hope that going forward, we are going to have peace in this country. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Amos in Kintampo. Let's move on to Adamu in Hohoi. Adamu, good morning to you. And what are your reflections, your thoughts on election 2020, and especially what happened in your constituency? Is it Adamu we've lost? Okay, so let's connect with Anasibit from the Bono East region. Who joins us. Now, Adamu, what exactly is the situation, the mood in the Bono East region where the NDC made quite a showing? What is the mood there, celebratory or not? Anna Sabit, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. So I was asking initially, what is the mood in the Bono East region currently? Is it one of excitement? Is it one that is down? What exactly is the mood?
In Techiman, this is the regional capital, and I'm on the principal streets of Techiman. The town is very quiet. I mean, business is ongoing as usual. There's nothing like any group celebrating. There seems to be nothing like it seems like there hasn't been any declaration yet. The town is on. I mean, as usual. You can see from the streets, business is ongoing as usual. I don't see NPP. I don't see NDC, and I see people going on their normal duties as usual. So this is what is happening in the Techiman Township, which is the Techiman South constituency specifically, and this is the situation here. I don't see anything as in there's been an election and one party has been declared. If you remember during the chairperson's declaration, she indicated that the Techiman South results is under contention. I don't know if that could play a factor in the reason why the town seems quite dull. Last night there were some celebrations by members of the New Patriotic Party after the declaration. They had a lot of fun on the streets, but this morning I see virtually nothing. I passed in front of the constituency party office of the New Patriotic Party, and the place is also very serene, very quiet, with few people over there. And in the township, like I said, nothing really is going on, and people are going on with their usual duties.
Now let's talk security, and you brought up the issue of Techiman South. What is security like there currently?
Well, from the election day, there's been heavy security presence in Techiman, especially around the Electoral Commission's office and then the Coalition Center. Heavy security. I see a lot of police and military personnel, plus immigration and all the other security agencies. They are in town in their numbers. Yesterday, for instance, before the declaration by the Electoral Commission, they were all over town, in fact, patrolling up and down to ensure that there is sanity in the municipality. If you remember, 2 days ago, before the declaration of the Techiman South constituency results by the Electoral Commission, there were some confusions at the Coalition Center that led to the police trying to control the crowd, firing some warning shots. In the process, some 2 persons were hit by bullets, and later we understand the number was more than that. We picked from the NDC that 3 of their people died, but others are also responding to treatment at the hospital. from that day, I must say, there's a lot of security personnel in town, and the kind of confusion that erupted at the EC or at the collation center has not occurred anywhere in the municipality again since that particular day. Except that in some areas, especially the Zongo communities, people are quite shocked, people are afraid of what has happened, and so even those who may want to commit mayhem are kind of advising themselves, and they are very, very quiet from that particular day.
Finally, now you say some people are afraid. How have the people generally reacted to this fact of the police, the military using force in Techiman South and some people dying? Apart from the fear, the apprehension, what have you heard the people saying?
Can you repeat the question, the line?
So on the back of the shooting incidents that took the lives of some people, that's my final question for you. How have the people reacted? Apart from being afraid, how have the people reacted? What have they been telling you?
In terms of their reaction, some, we have two factions, the NDC and the MPP. I was at the collation center when the incident happened. Those are the NDC side that are expressing disappointment in how the security personnel managed the situation. They felt they should not have, fired those warning shots that led to what we have seen. But on the other side, I have spoken to a number of people who are also of the view that the situation could have been avoided if the supporters had not masked up at the collation center. So, it's mixed reaction. Some are disappointed. Some are also saying that the security had no option than to do what they did because their lives were equally at risk, and that of the Electoral Commission and the whole of us, this media, and the rest of us who were at the collation center. Then they felt if an action had not been taken on that day, we could have recorded something very unfortunate. So it's a mixed reaction here in the township, but we hope that will be the end of it. And as I'm seeing in the municipality, things are quite normal. And in the Zongo communities, even after the declaration of the NPP's presidential candidate as the winner, the NPP people in the Zongo community did not even jubilate because those who were shot or those who passed on are from that area. So both sides were kind of mourning, and so they could not jubilate. And it's very, very unfortunate.
Anas Sabit, thank you very much. Reporting there from the Bono East region. Quite some disturbing, news coming from there. But hey, there's more coming your way on the AM show. It is Showbiz with Caddy. That's up next when we return.
Good morning, I'm Kadi and you're welcome to the Showbiz segment. Now, after the election pressure, let's just dig into some Showbiz news and let's see how some celebrities reacted during and after the elections, after Nana Addo was declared president-elect. And let's hear from Kwakese.
Masa, wabubwa baniwi, ubanchi ambwa kudu ya fufuru. Wate aze, wakoye mkwasi adina uku we stupid owu. Stupid owu ye nsumpo. Jan kwasi adina politician nimba gwa brochire uku amano kwasi a. Ubanchi ambwa kudu ya fufuru na gususu nesie ubane 4 years ubanchi bebo. Ghana for move on. What I say? Man ko yen kwasi ade na unko wu stupid owu ko wu aye besro.
That was Kwakese, but let's see how some celebrities reacted to the president's win. And then we have the likes of Shatawale, we have Papi Kojo, and he tweeted, "Congrats, Nana. I'm coming home, big Nana. I forgive you for abandoning me in Italy." And Rosalind Ngiza also posted a photo of the president in her Instagram. And Miss Forsen, that's Lydia Forsen, tweeted, "The majority have spoken." Sarkodie also tweeted, "Congrats, Ghana." Stoneboy also tweeted, "Congratulations to the MPP and Nana Addo, the president-elect." We also have one from Empress Gifty. "Thank you, Ghana, for voting for more." And that's another Instagram posts, and these are celebrities congratulating the president. That's from Obrafo, rapper Obrafo, and from Prince David Osei and his party t-shirt. And this from Fantana, congratulating her mother for her win for the NDC, and that's also from Papi Kojo as well. That's all we have for Showbiz for this morning. There's more Showbiz at midday with Becky.
Well, it's a wrap for another day, the 10th day of December. We still are your Election HQ. We promised to bring you extensive coverage before, during, and after the elections. And in the aftermath of the election and the acceptances and the non-acceptance, we shall keep you up to date right here on JoyNews. Thank you very much for staying with us up to this point. The rest of our programs continue right here on this network. Do have a wonderful day.